Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for the 12th in a 25-ish part series, journeying chapter by chapter through Holly by Stephen King. As I break things, Holly by Stephen King. His latest book, we have in this video a So What Happened section, a literary criticism section, and a writer's corner. But I have to say off the top that this is one of the most well, I guess we're going two chapters at a time, not chapter by chapter, but this is one of the most confusing pairings of chapters that this book has presented to us yet. Possibly the highest of highs, two high highs as far as writing itself is concerned, but also just some really bad stuff. I mean, not really bad stuff. I should put a misnomer there that it's not bad stuff. It's just stuff that makes you wonder what we're doing here, what's going on. So what happened in this pair of chapters, Olivia and Maria submit some of Barbara's poetry to a young poets contest. Hooray. She's a finalist. Hooray. And the prize is $25,000. Hooray. Holly congratulates Jerome on his publication. Hooray. Roddy is at the bowling alley. Hooray. But he comes home to find Emily, who has discovered that Holly might be closing in on the pair of them via social media. Anti-hooray. And then we have Jerome call Barbara, and Barbara refuses to tell him on what she is working. She does not want to be seen as a copycatter. Your brother's writing, and now you happen to be a writer too, whatever. And then we have Holly, who is in her mother's house and trying to find the postcards that she left from her father. I may have made up the bit about Holly being in her mother's house for that. She might be in her own place. I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. No, I'm pretty sure she was at her mother's house. Anyway, that is what happened in this pair of chapters. So here's where I want to start. Look, I will be pleased as punch if thematically, if story-wise, and not coincidence story-wise. What's going to happen is Barbara's going to remember that, oh, I saw this van in these people's garage. Maybe they are the killers. Woof, right? I mean, that is a Star Wars level sort of probability, and the only reason Star Wars was good storytelling, don't get me wrong, but everybody in the universe is related, right? And that's an entire star system universe, not just like a around the corner Earth to Mars type Star Wars type thing. So I will be very surprised if the Barbara angle is able to be made up in that way. I don't think it's going to. And because of that, this feels like a totally different book. And we'll get back to this in the writer's corner portion because, well, it's not bad. It's just not this book. Now, Stevie, we have this on page 225. Olivia is suggesting to Barbara some readings that she might do. You suggested the Beats, so that's who I'm reading. I got an anthology at the college bookstore. Ginsberg, Snyder, Corso, Ed Dorn. I love him. Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Is he still alive? Died a month ago. He was older than I am. I want you to read some prose if you are game. It may help you. James Dickey to start with. You know his poems, and there's the famous novel Deliverance. I saw the movie with men going down a river in canoes. Yes, but don't read that one. Read To the White Sea. White Sea. Lesser known, but I think it's better. For your purposes, I want you to read at least one Cormac McCarthy novel. All the Pretty Horses or Suttree. Will you do that? Well, okay. But Stephen, Ginsburg, it's a white man. Ed Dorn, it's a white man. Look, I'm not bringing these things up because of myself. I'm bringing these up because Stephen King brings these things up. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, white man. Snyder, maybe Gary Snyder? If so, white guy. Corso, Gregory Corso? You guessed it, white guy. James Dickey, he's a white man. Cormac McCarthy, white guy. The only minority, the only minority as far as race is concerned, and this is an argument that I've gotten into many times on the channel because people say that I don't read diversely enough. Look deeper into the people that I read. So if you're stopping at white guy, okay, look deeper into the people I read. But this is one of Stephen King's arguments, not mine. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up. This is what I did through the entire Harry Potter series, bringing up the things that J.K. Rowling preached but did not practice. The only minority, the only racial minority that Olivia gives Barbara to read is Jorge Castro, who's a fictional character. Stevie, no. Here's another thing from this portion of the chapter here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've forgotten something again. They give Barbara here, without questioning, they give her Foster's. Foster's is Australian for pee-pee. It's terrible beer, but they give her Foster's. Isn't she like 19? Okay, people drink before they're 21, whatever. They didn't even question it. Maybe I'm wrong on her age. I can't remember. But for me, that's part of the problem. I don't really care her age. I think she's like 19, and tough to put that in a novel where you're highbrow, Stephen. We've talked a little bit in this series about how this is just sort of top of the mind fluff from Stephen King about the whole lockdown and everything. Taking the mask off, putting the mask on, dapping, elbow kisses. Here's another thing that seems to have grafted itself into Stephen King's novel from that time period. Barbara stands to win $25,000. I believe she's going to. Holly is now a multimillionaire. Jerome is now published, and he's going to be making thousands of dollars of his own. Is this the idea from the lockdowns of the stimmy checks going around that has just sort of overgrown its regularity into Stephen King's novel because it was top of the mind during the time, people having all of this free money to spend, people getting money they did not earn? Is that what's happening here? This just sort of fragmentary commentary on the day, which has worked its way into the novel. On page 234 here, again, I may have forgotten something, but we have in the section with Roddy and Emily, Roddy thinking to himself, everyone sometimes has blank spots, he tells himself when it happens. You've researched it yourself. It's a temporarily fouled circuit, transient aphasia, no different from a muscle cramp that hurts like Satan and then it lets go. The idea that it might be incipient Alzheimer's is ridiculous. Is this the first we're getting of this mention here of Roddy having such terrible mental lapses? Now, obviously, this is later in their story than the other parts, but it seems to me that this is the first we're hearing of that. On 236, I did not mark what I was trying to find. Oh, yes. 236 here. Maybe it's not 230. Yeah, 237. My fault. We have Holly who is reflecting on her father's absence, and her father had to sell farm equipment in the Midwest to make money. That's what he did to provide. And we have Holly recounting this, saying, in flyover country, he might have been a sales dynamo, but at home, he was the original Mr. Milquetoast. Flyover country, Stephen? Flyover country? Okay, I see what you're doing there, Stephen, with your East Coast elitism, and I don't care for it. Your East Coast. Maybe that's why I'm having such a terrible time with your last two books. I'm just a simple Midwesterner, just some country bumpkin. Ah, Stephen, your words, they're so purty, they just hurt my mind. I can't keep up with them. Stephen, shut up, you fool. I, Flyover country. Okay, okay. A lot goes on in Bangor, is that what you're telling me? On 238 and 239, we have what might be the most heartrending section of the book so far. This is again Holly speaking of her father. He took 4 years of Latin in high school and won his own award, first prize, not second, for a 2-page essay he wrote on that language. The title of this essay was Quid est Veritas? What is truth? Over Charlotte's strong, almost strident objections, Holly took 2 years of Latin in high school herself. All that was offered. She did not shine, as her father had done in his pre-salesman day, but she carried a solid B average and remembered enough to know that Tristis Puella was Sad Girl and Bella Sideria was Star Wars. What she thinks now, what is clear to her now, is that she took Latin as a way of reaching out to her father, and he had reached back, hadn't he? Sent her those postcards from a place like Omaha and Tulsa and Rapid City, and we jump down just a little bit. All of his postcards were to her, written in Latin. It was her job and her pleasure to translate them. She turns this one over and reads the message. So, this is a beautiful little bit of this novel. It's unfortunate that it feels out of place. It's unfortunate that it feels like it's crammed into this novel. It's unfortunate that, if I'm being honest, I kind of just don't care at this point. That's unfortunate because this is good writing. Not only that, we have another little layer there. Her father was good at Latin. She took Latin to be in her father's good graces. She wanted that attention from her father. She was crying out for attention, and she got it. Her father wrote her these letters, these postcards in Latin. That's a beautiful touch. But we even have an element of this which is not directly recounted in the text. Yes, that is Holly's connection with her father. That is something unique to their circumstance. And on a writer's level, I'll get to this later. But the added level to this from Holly's standpoint, from Holly's father's standpoint, is that the connection between them is at the expense of her mother. Her mother cannot read those letters. That is another layer of depth to this, which is obvious enough. I mean, it's right there on the surface, right? But Stephen King respects you enough not to go ahead and mention it. Stephen King respects you enough to not put your nose in it. Stephen King respects you enough to let it go without saying, and that is hard to do as a writer, but it is something that has to be done in this circumstance. And because it is left to the reader to understand without being told it directly, we feel that bit of respect from Stephen King, and it brings us into the novel further. This is one of the aspects of, ironically, detective fiction and mystery fiction that brings people closer into the text, is that readers love figuring things out for themselves. Mystery novels, detective novels, they circle around this idea. That's why they have such high engagement. But even little things like that, readers love to figure out on their own. Now, on to the writer's corner section of this. The scene in the opening of this with Olivia and Marie and Barbara, where Marie and Barbara have submitted, or Marie and Olivia, pardon me, have submitted Barbara's poetry to the contest. That scene has all sorts of charm. That scene has great comedic timing. That scene has nice little touches, kind of smarmy if you are expecting to pick this book up and read The Shining or Green Mile. Kind of smarmy if you're expecting those novels, but standing on its own is perfectly acceptable writing for sure, and it's even some great character stuff, but it feels out of place and it falls flat because who knows where we're going with that section of the novel, but it's nowhere particularly productive, right? Barbara's going to win $25,000 or whatever. But this leads me back to the bookend of these two chapters. It opens very strong with Olivia and uh, Marie submitting Barbara's writing, and there's some great character moments, and it ends really strong with Holly remembering her father and wishing for him, essentially. Doesn't really say that, but essentially wishing for him. But here's the thing. The last bit with the father really could have been beautiful. It was good. It was good storytelling. It really could have been beautiful storytelling, except that we're 240 pages into this book, and I don't care about Holly. We're 240 pages into this book. I don't even like Holly. And look, maybe that's just me. Maybe you are in a much better place with this novel than am I. I can't stand Holly. I think Holly's the least compelling character in this novel so far. Literally everyone else that we've seen is more compelling than Holly. Holly is a wash rag of a character. That's unfortunate because this is a very beautiful scene. And here is writing gold with this scene. As I ruin more things, knock them off my desk. You want to connect with your readers in a way that feels personal to them. And ironically, one of the ways that we do that best is not with generalities. So, for a lesser writer than Stephen King, this idea of making a heartfelt moment between a daughter and her deceased father would seem to be, I want to make this felt to my reader by giving them a scene which is so universal, anyone can see themselves in that role. So, what might a lesser writer than Stephen King choose to do? Maybe she finds her favorite dress from childhood, the one her daddy liked. Her daddy bought it for her in the 4th grade. That, however, would be bad. Why would that be bad? It's so generic that maybe we don't even remember the thing that our father bought for us that we connected to because he bought it for us, as if we were simply going to graft Holly's dress straight onto our childhood. But because Stephen King went so specific with the choice of Latin. The choice of Latin, and it becomes a small moment between a father and his daughter at the exclusion of her mother, at the exclusion of his wife. You do that, we can all go back to the moment we had with a parent or an uncle, an aunt, a sibling that was your thing with that person. My mother, this little thing that I could talk about, with my mother, whenever she baked something, you use unsweetened chocolate. She would always call us into the kitchen and give us the batter things that we could lick the chocolate off of the batter things, never telling us that this was unsweetened chocolate. What a terrible thing to do to a child. What a miserable thing to do to a child. My mother was pure evil. But by telling that story, you have been taken back to some place in your childhood where your father would razz you, where your mother would pull a prank on you. That is a very specific memory for me that leads to something being specifically felt by the listener. For Stephen King giving this example of Latin, which is the very special connection, the very unique special connection between a father and his daughter. Not a generic connection, a very special and unique connection tells us about him. He knows he picked the wrong woman, but it gave him his beautiful daughter, his wonderful daughter. It tells us about Holly, because she is trying to keep secrets from her mother. And it tells us there was a special connection between the two of them. That is how going more specific into something actually becomes more universal in its meaning than going generic becomes something which is just throwaway. That's all I have for this video. This is the 12th in a 25-ish part series, journeying a couple chapters at a time through Holly by Stephen King. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting the like button really does do me a whole lot of good here on the channel. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button, because there is literature to be had on this channel, and that's all I do here. I hope to have you back for the next one.